Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Behind the Bars on RacerTV. I'm Rodney Tomlin, and today we're going to be talking about the 2011 Steele Creek GNCC ATV race. It took place on March 26, 2011, round number 3 of a championship, which was an era and a time that, well, it seems like it was such a short time ago, but when you look at the big picture, it really was a long time ago. As we talk about it with our GNCC historian, and welcoming once again Mr. Jared Bolton to Behind the Bars. And Jared, hello, and welcome once again. Again, Steele Creek GNCC, and a big part of your stomping grounds, I guess we should say. And as we take a look at this particular facility, we did a Behind the Bars last week with Barry Hawk talking about that amazing finish right down to the wire in 2007, if memory serves me correct. But, that was just one of the many stories that Steele Creek GNCC seems to bring along. This particular venue, probably one of the most storied events from a standpoint of mystery, to be honest with you, because it seems like there's some kind of spirits or something that live in those mountains that always brings something neat and something extra to the races when we go to Steele Creek.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You talk about spirits and mystery, and actually the Brown Mountain Lights are a series still unsolved to this day. You never know when they're going to pop up. They're these ghost lights that pop up on Brown Mountain, which is actually the next mountain over from Steele Creek. If you've ridden the Steele Creek course, there's one section where you get way up on top of basically the highest point of the property. And if you look whichever way the track's running, if you look out off of that ridge, you can see a mountain across from you, and that is Brown Mountain. So it's almost like it's supposed to be that way, just from the folklore and the mystery of the area in general, that it's no surprise that Steele Creek produces these kinds of wild races. This is just one in, dozens of stories that we've seen from Steele Creek. And these Behind the Bar shows are really cool. They're really nostalgic. And when I picked this one, I go, oh, that really wasn't that long ago. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's been 10 years ago. Like, holy crap, man. It does not feel like it's been a whole decade since this race, but here we are 10 years later. And this is still one of the top ATV races in my opinion.
I have to agree. I mean, this among so many, and the neat thing about the mystical things that took place at Steele Creek, it wasn't necessarily always on the racetrack. There was always crazy things that took place off the track. I mean, we had the massive windstorm that one year. We've had crazy fires there. We had the one time that this was a race that Paul Whibley won the race, but didn't win the race because they called the race on the white flag or with 2 laps to go because it was so crazy. We had the finish with Chris Borich, the craziness that he had in his finishes there at Steele Creek, obviously the Barry Hawk finish. So, I mean, there are a lot of stories on and off that racetrack that bring back a lot of great memories. And to say that there weren't a lot of people there would be an understatement. Because there was a lot of people at that particular event, and how we squeezed it in, and probably one of the coolest venues, in my opinion, to go watch GNCC with the way the place always cloverleafed the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's simply because of the lay of the land. When you get up in the mountains, and I grew up about 2 hours from Steele Creek, so I spent a lot of time not just coming to Steele Creek specifically, but other local races in that area, and actually coming and riding at Brown Mountain. That's just the lay of the land there. The course would cloverleaf because we'd go to the top of this ridge, but to get to this ridge here, you actually had to come all the way back down to the field because the land in between was literally a valley like this. And, GNCC is supposed to be tough, but we want you to be able to ride the course and not sit at the bottom of a ravine for, 2 hours. So, Steele Creek really cloverleafed simply because there's no other option. You had to come all the way back down, or otherwise there was nowhere to go.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was tough on the spectators to get back in there and watch, but, in the pits, you got to see a lot of great action. I mean, and to me, it was probably one of the funnest racetracks to ride pre-race of any. It was like riding a roller coaster out there. The way the trails were also I mean, you only had so many places that you could go. So those trails became like a lot like roadways, but some of the G outs and things that you would have and some of those dips, it always presented a lot of fun for me to pre-ride the course on the Friday or Thursday leading into the race weekend. But certainly had its challenges as far as creating a racetrack, but the guys always did a great job there. Our second member of the Behind the Bars episode with us this week, once again, will be a legacy of the GNCC announcing staff, Mr. Tim Cotter's son, talking about Mr. Griffin Cotter, who is a big and monumental part of, the track crew, as well as the RacerTV crew. And we say good afternoon and welcome to Griff Cotter. And Griff, I tell you, buddy, going into this one, even though, you were kind of hit and miss probably on the races during that time, I have to say that Steele Creek was always one that you heard the stories about, even probably when you were a little kid, when your dad would come back home from the races on the weekends.
Yeah, for sure, Rodney. And Steele Creek, this was the 2011 Steele Creek was probably right at my infancy on being a regular at the GNCCs. But it is kind of bittersweet sitting here talking about it in the rearview mirror, knowing we won't be going to Steele Creek this year. And man, I hope we do go back someday, because while it is a logistical nightmare, one way in, one way out, traffic, the juice definitely outweighed the squeeze. And we see that in all the memories that you just brought up with the racing there. And it doesn't seem like that long ago. And then I look at it and I realize that, like you said, it's been nearly a decade. So much has changed, but a lot has stayed the same. And really excited to be here talking about this race today.
No doubt. 2021, it will be 10 years this March, believe it or not, an entire decade since this particular race was run. And our next member of the Behind the Bars cast today will be one of the competitors on that day, and a long-standing competitor, I think, celebrating his 27th season as an XC1 pro. We're talking about the one, the only Johnny Gallagher. Johnny, welcoming you to Behind the Bars, and also just letting you know, hey, we as spectators realize, we talk about this race as it being a great opportunity and perfect for, watching some amazing racing and so forth. But I have to think, from a racer standpoint, as great as some of the memories are, man, that place probably had to present some of the biggest challenges you'll probably face throughout any GNCC racing season.
Yeah, no question. First off, guys, obviously, thanks for having me on. Enjoy doing these and looking forward to a great show today. Steele Creek definitely presents a very unique set of challenges as a racer. Definitely the hardest track to pass on, always has been, ever since its first year in 1997, I believe it was. And I raced there every year. So it was an awesome racetrack. Like you said, the terrain was great, and the fans there were second to none. I mean, we'd see spectators come out in record numbers every year. And as has been alluded to early in the show, I mean, the stories and the legend of Steele Creek is real, man. I mean, it just created these crazy scenarios through the track, some unforeseen circumstances, but it was one that you always kind of, even if you liked that track, which I did, you always kind of were just a little bit on edge coming into that one, knowing that you really had to be on your game to try and get a good run in.
Yes, no doubt about that. And of course, as we look back at this time and era, we were kind of post the ATV hoopla with all the factory support. We still had a few teams that were offering some factory support. One of those was our title sponsor at that particular time, our good friends at Can-Am. And two of the riders that we'll be focusing on as far as this race are concerned are two riders from that Can-Am team. We're talking about Chris Bithell, Adam McGill. To look back and to think, 10 years ago, we still had that factory support on the ATV side of thing. And just a couple of years before that, just to imagine what Pro Row looked like on the ATV side of things, as far as the factory support and all the support that was coming in from so many different directions. It's crazy to think that, though it seems like it was only yesterday, now that we look at the big picture, man, it does seem like a long time ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, 10 years, it definitely doesn't seem like it's been that long. But I guess for someone like me, time's kind of a relative thing. It definitely doesn't seem like it's been 27 years for me in XC1. And, I raced my first GNCC in 1989. So I just kind of roll with the dates, roll with the years, and it's all relative. But yeah, it's been a long time. And this is one of those races that, even though it has been a decade here coming up soon, nobody's going to forget this one anytime soon, because it was definitely exciting.
No doubt about that. Exciting racing, exciting times. And I say, let's get right into it, guys. Let's roll the footage and check out what took place on that day, the craziness as we set the stage for this one. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you go today, you go then. Families and fans are out in full force.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we just talked about there a moment ago. I mean, the unbelievable spectator turnouts at this event every year are something that you just can't forget. You get there, the fans are enthusiastic. There's people everywhere. And, that guy right there, Chris Borich, his hair might have been a little funny color at the time, but he was on a serious roll coming into this race. And I think everybody was kind of looking for a way to kind of take away his momentum, because, he had won the last 7 races in 2010 and the first 2 races in 2011. He had already wrapped up his second championship the previous season, and was starting to march away with this one. So I think everybody was working really hard to try and figure out a way to slow him down.
No doubt about that. As we saw some highlights from the morning race there, a lot of utility quads, and we had a chance to catch up with Adam McGill.
But I know you want to finish up front. What's it going to take for you guys to beat Chris Borich?
I think it'll take a lot of luck. And the biggest problem we have now is that confidence goes a long way. And Chris's confidence, he's got his stuff working good, got his bike working well, and when you're confident like that, it's hard to beat somebody. But I think that me and Bith will get up there with him and get one in front, one behind, and kind of, do stuff like that with him, kind of get in his head. And that way he's got to work around one that's in front while the one behind kind of capitalizes while he's trying to get around the one in front. So, it's just going to take a lot of strategy to get by him, and I think we can do it today. It's supposed to rain, it's supposed to be nasty, so the Canadians always seem to excel in the mud. They're almost like a fish, I guess.
Wow,
right,
what a tough-looking guy there. There's Chris Bithell. Let's listen in there.
Chris Bithell is currently second in points. Chris, at the last race, you got out front, you led some laps. You and Chris Borich were running a pretty fast pace out there. Did you learn anything from that?
I think each race we do learn something about each other, and his pace is fast, and I was just trying to stay with him there last lap. He got a good pass on me, and I was just trying to figure out where he might make a mistake or I get around him. There was 1 or 2 lines that I knew about, and I was hoping he didn't, but heck, you got to give it to him. He knows what he's doing out there. So he hit him, and so did I.
All right, well, we're here in North Carolina today going into the 3rd round. We may get some rain. How are you feeling going into the race?
I'm feeling good. It's a little cold, but we'll get over it. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. I'm ready to go.
All right, thanks, Chris.
I'll tell you, what's really neat there, guys, is, we actually had a team there, teammates. I think Adam may have alluded a little bit to the fact of some team tactics style racing, even though, he wasn't necessarily saying they were going to try to take out Borich. But, we look at this time, guys, and this is a time when Chris Borich was so dominant during this race. If memory serves me correct, Johnny, I think he had like 8 or 9 race wins coming into this, even though this was only the 3rd race of the season. The last half of the season, the year before in 2010, Chris Borich had been virtually unstoppable, and these guys were on a mission that day.
Chris was kind of really at the top of his game in 2011. This was the height of kind of the Borich era. Obviously, winning that first championship in 2009, he really got things figured out, had the program dialed, and it was just a well-oiled machine. In much of 2010, it was kind of much of the same. He dominated 2010 and coming in 2011, grabbing the first 2 wins. That guy right there, Taylor Kaiser, a lot of guys, Adam McGill, Chris Bithell, Jared McClure, a lot of guys were really gunning for that number 1 play to Borich, and they knew that they needed to start beating him real soon if that was going to be the case. But it was almost an impossible task back in that era. He was, as Chris Bithell said, he knew exactly what he was doing, and it was just kind of business as usual for him to go through the paces throughout the race and let it come to him, and it was working very, very well for him.
It's amazing to me. I mean, here we see Chris Borich. He's kind of buried back in the pack a little bit. I think he might be outside the top 5 here in the early part of the race. And even being in that situation, I mean, it never seemed to be much of a big deal. I mean, he was always able to make up the time. But, you know, as we look and watch this race, I mean, it's interesting. You know, we forget about the battles that Taylor Kaiser brought, that Chris Bithell brought out, you know, post the Bill Balance era, if you will. I mean, Bill was still kind of a factor, I think, at some places and sometimes at this point. But, I mean, all in all, I mean, the torch had been passed. You had Taylor Kaiser, you had Chris Bithell, you know, all chasing Chris Borich. At this time, it was pre-Walker Fowler. I mean, there were a lot of great things. And even then, you know, Jared McClure was the sneaky snake back then. I mean, he was a guy that could sneak right up on you in the tall grass and steal a podium away before you knew it.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of what you just alluded to there. I mean, actually, this was the first season that we did not have Bill Balance present. He had finished out. He raced the very last race in 2010, and at that point, decided he was good to call it a career after being injured much of 2010. He did race the final race at Ironman, and then was done from there. He kind of was at this point was guiding the team of Taylor Kaiser, the Balance Racing Yamaha team. Taylor Kaiser was their XC1 rider, and Walker Fowler was having a crazy dominant season this year in 2011 in that XC2 class, and would go on to win actually overalls that year from the XC2. But yeah, I mean, Chris Borich was kind of alone at the top in terms of the era, but yeah, tons of competition from individual racers, both on this day and across the entire season. And Adam McGill had kind of come off that run he was on with KTM, where he won a bunch of races in 08, had a solid season in 09, but just didn't get the wins. And then 2010 would have been his first year with this Werner Can-Am team. So they, by now in 2011, they'd kind of gotten their bikes figured out, they'd got the team figured out, kind of gotten through the struggles they'd had in 2010. And both he and his teammate Chris Bithell were up there battling for wins week in and week out. So it was exciting racing for sure.
It was, and you know, we look back at it seemed like there was, I mean, kind of like what we're looking at now. Especially recently, you know, the availability of anybody can win, or at least anybody, I mean, not necessarily anybody can win. Well, they could. We saw that happening a lot, but at this particular point, Chris Borich was making it tough for anybody. I think this is the time that we saw that patented Borich, the last lap pass, where people were just getting dominated there on those last laps. And, you know, I think this is where that all came to fruition. Jared, you know, looking back on this time in ATV racing and GNCC, you know, we knew that Chris Borich was going to be dominant. We're coming out of that Bill Balance era as a historical factor, but you know, here we are, you know, watching, and from a fan standpoint, I know it had to be interesting to you to see this kind of domination from Chris Borich, but also to see the life that was breathed into some of these other riders that were starting to mount challenges. You know, you had the Taylor Kaisers, the Chris Bithells, the Adam McGills, McClures. They were all knocking on the door of Chris Borich at some point or another, and likely leading at some point during the race.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, this was an exciting era for me, because this is kind of where I really started to pay more attention to the ATV side of things. You know, I grew up on the bike side, grew up a bike racer, and you know, I didn't follow the ATV side super close, but I didn't completely ignore it. You know, I've always had a ton of respect for the ATV guys. You know, I've ridden them and I go, man, I've got no idea how guys go this fast on these things. It's so impressive to me. And this era was really cool because you know, Chris Borich was obviously just the hands-down favorite no matter what race it was. He wasn't one of those guys that you go, oh, you know, this is a Borich track. Every track was a Borich track. And then, you know, when you get the guys who get in there and play spoiler, man, that just really made things super, super interesting. And when those guys started doing it more consistently, man, it just, things got really, really exciting. And, you know, this race here, things end up a little bit different for Chris. There for a little bit, it looks like it's going to be one of those typical Chris Borich runs, but things go a little bit different in the end. And this, like I said, this is one of my all-time favorite ATV races.
Yeah, we're watching. I think right here we've got McGill out front. We've got Kaiser back there. We've got Bithell back there also battling. We got Chris Borich trying to work his way up through the pack. I think I might have mentioned McClure in the mix as well as we're going through all this. Johnny, watching this, I'm not sure where you were on this day, but, watching this all unfold, I mean, what kind of memories does this bring back for you? Look, there's the 341 of Brian Wolf also. I mean, he was in the mix and thick of things. And those guys, I mean, if you notice, they were very close coming through the finish line there.
Yeah, that was Brian Wolf. This was his first year in the XC1 Pro class. He had come off of winning that championship, or tying for the championship and getting the win, getting the overall championship in XC2 the year before on a tiebreaker with Walker Fowler. But as we're watching these guys in the pits, I think the thing that strikes me the most watching this is just the kind of calm composure that Chris Borich had at this time. During this era, he was so good. He was so much, and the other guys might get offended, but I just call him like I see him. He was so much better than everyone else at this point. He didn't need to try. He just kind of rode. We saw him get a bad start. He just methodically worked his way up through the pack and gets to the point where eventually he's up there battling with the leaders. And this is where he developed, as you said, that Borich to come from the back and take the lead on the last lap. And he's kind of alluded to it, but the one thing the reason why he did that is he knew that if he rode his machine as hard as he could, as he was physically capable of, I mean, he was a machine himself at that time, he was more likely to have mechanical issues. So he would just go basically as fast as he needed to, which crazily enough was as fast as everyone else could go. And then he would just take these wins on the last lap and just, checked off 75 of them over the years, and kind of you can see that on screen as you're watching him. He's so calculated, so under control, with just really, really, really at the pinnacle of his career in 2011.
And seeing how close the top five are together in this is kind of interesting as well. I see where Chris Bithell was running like 6th and 5th on the first couple of laps, and he went from 5th to 1st in one lap of racing. We saw Adam McGill drop from the lead into 2nd all the way back to 3rd, particularly one point there on the last lap. I mean, there were a lot of passes, a lot of things that change throughout these races. And not saying that they don't these days, but it just seems like the game is a little different today than what it was so many years ago.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the effect of how differently our current champion Walker Fowler races versus how Chris Borich did. I mean, Chris was content to let everyone else lead, just sit back there and do his thing, and that would kind of bunch up the pack depending on who was feeling good that day. Where now, the races really truly are a sprint, from the very get-go, and Walker and Bryson Neal and those guys, Cole Richardson, it seems like they're comfortable getting out there and just pinning it right from the get-go. The bikes are so good now. You look at, knock on wood, you look at Walker's finish record the last 6 years, 7 years, no mechanical issues whatsoever. I mean, obviously I'm a Yamaha guy, but let's face it, I mean, the bikes, the Yamahas right now are so good you almost can't break them. So they don't have to ride them like Chris did with Suzuki back then, where he knew he was on a machine that wasn't capable of going as fast as he could go. I mean, he was just a beast.
Yeah, and I understand. I don't know, but I believe Chris is going back to the Suzuki this year, if I understand correct, right?
Yeah, that's the rumor. I haven't made it down to Florida yet, so I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I've seen some pictures, and I believe he's back on a yellow machine for 2021.
Well, Griff Cotter, watching this right now, and I know you've watched with bated breath here to watch this all unfold. I mean, what are you seeing about this racing as opposed to maybe today's racing? You see anything any differently? You think it's a lot the same?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Borich going back to Suzuki because, I mean, Jared, you might have to fact check me here, but I believe his last championship was won on this bike, the Suzuki, and really, I don't know when the last Suzuki ATV came off the production line, but when he won his last championship, he was on a 6 or 7 year old machine, right? I mean, something along those lines, and I think that, and you see McGill and Bithell on a Can-Am here. You see Kaiser on the Yamaha. Are we coming down to the finish right now?
Is out.
No.
We're ready for the stretch run.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
White
Well, this is the
flag.
white flag. Yep.
Pedal to the metal,
Yeah,
boys.
and
Anyways,
as we see that white flag, you see where Chris Borich is right there getting ready to take the lead. I mean, this was his jam back then.
Right, and so in doing the research and watching this and preparing for the show, I looked at this and I'm like, Borich takes the lead on the last lap. No way McGill wins this. And then if it wasn't for a mechanical,
Now these boys gotta deal with
we
lap
could be
traffic as well.
watching a different race here. It'd be like, wouldn't be that spectacular because how many times Borich, right?
Oh,
Okay,
Chris
so
Borich has
what?
gotten into the lead.
Move on to the
How
next one.
many
But
times have we
Borich
seen
didn't
this
Borich,
happen? On the last
and
lap, it is an
McGill
instant
was able to
replay,
take
for
the win here
example,
today. I
of
don't mean to be a
our last
spoiler,
race in Georgia.
but anyway,
McGill
I
and
kind of
Kaiser
lost track of where I
third and
was with the
These
Borich
guys
being
have
on
to
the
find
Suzuki,
something extra.
McGill
The
being on
Borich
the
fans in the
Can-Am,
woods cheering
Kaiser
him.
being on the
They wanna see another
Yamaha,
patented
the
last
more
lap
robust
Chris
machine that they
Borich
could ride
pass.
more confidently. I
They've
think
seen
that played
it.
into a lot
Now
of
they
what
want to see another
is
patented
going on,
Chris Borich
not only
come
during
from
this
behind
race, but
victory,
in
and
the
it
time
might be
period.
en route.
Today, like you said, Fowler's finish
If I were
record,
Bithell,
he can
if
go
I
out
were
and just
McGill,
hammer on that
Kaiser, you
thing
gotta get
for
desperate at one
2
of these
hours,
points.
and it's no problem.
So you can't really get aggressive.
So that's
if
kind of
the
what I
guy's
see
putting
in this
distance
race,
between you,
and
and he's doing
as
it
opposed
now.
to a race
He
that
just
watching,
saved something
in
for
real
the
time.
final lap, and they don't have any way to respond.
And Johnny, it seems like with most people going to Yamahas, I mean, there are still a few Hondas, probably a lot more Hondas on the GNCC line than you're seeing at most of the top level races. The Yamaha, I mean, with the advancements of the technology of these four-stroke ATVs and what they've been able to do. You mentioned it a few moments ago. These things are bulletproof. You can almost take one bike and maintenance it well throughout the season, and you could ride that thing all year long, I think, race after race. And that's something that we probably didn't have, especially at the level that we're watching right now back then. And I know a lot of you guys, you switch bikes every 3 or 4 races or something like that. But from an outsider's, just looking at the big picture, if you needed to run all 13 races on that machine, the machines are built well enough today that they could withstand that, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've actually run one race bike for the last several seasons. I think 2017 or 2016 was the last time that I used more than one race bike in a season. Now, granted, I only do GNCCs on that bike, but they hold up for a season, no problem at all. Walker uses usually about 3 bikes a year, but that's just easier for Mark if he's trying to maintain so many bikes. It just gives him more opportunity to maintenance the bikes in between. But yeah, there's been a great advancement across, in the last 10 years, for sure.
Kaiser, as we
No doubt. And as we watch that one come down to the wire right there, wow. I mean, we still have some indications of great finishes like that. What we see right there with Adam McGill taking the win. Let's listen in again.
Confidence was key.
Always
and
something
I think
special.
you had that here today.
Oh yeah, it definitely feels good to be back. It was a good time. Glad to be back up front. I don't know what happened to Borich out there, but finally ended the streak, done it, got my confidence back, and I'm ready to kick some butt in South Carolina.
How long has it been since we have seen you?
Oh gosh, it's been almost 2 years since I've won a race, and it feels so good to be back, and especially on a new brand. Starting a new new team. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to win another one. So we'll see how it goes in South Carolina.
It's good to see you back.
For sure.
And as we check out the
Interesting,
DWT
no
standings,
doubt.
look, Borich's lead has been cut back.
Listening
Bithell,
to
Kaiser,
Adam McGill there, it's almost like listening to an Adam McGill now. Minus, he was a little more reserved then, I think, because of his particular presence with the factory teams and so forth. But all in all, Adam, looked like a kid there. I mean, it's hard to believe that was 10 years ago. Griff, I know that, there's some things coming up on your mind. You got some questions, some points to make?
Yeah, like Johnny, this is directed to you, as a competitor, you got to see Adam there saying the streak has been broken. We've broke the 9 race streak from Borich, and on the podium, it's all positive. And then you get back to your truck and you hear that it was a mechanical. What does that do to your mindset as a rider and a competitor moving into the next race? A win's a win, but what does that do to your psyche?
So I think there's actually 2 things at play there. One of which is exactly what you said. A win's a win. A racer, a competitor, you get a win, and it kind of bolsters you up. It gives you a little extra confidence. But even from the standpoint of once you are told, hey, because I think Chris we talked a little bit. He ended up losing a stator, I believe. The issue with those stators or that machine was he was building a whole bunch of clutch heat because he was having to ride hard. When he was able to control the pace from the front, he could kind of control what his bike was doing, and he didn't have to push it as hard. Where this race, as we saw, like he had to kind of fight from the back. He got the lead, but if you talk to him, if he was on, I'm sure he'd say he had to ride a little harder than he wanted to get that lead and keep that lead at that point. So ultimately, even if it is the machine that breaks, you know, the guy's found a chink in his armor at this point. And if you look at the rest of 2011, you know, yes, Chris did go on to win a championship, but his 2011, although it was a dominant season, was nowhere near as dominant as it had been in 2010. And that was where, you know, McGill, Kaiser, Bithell, all three of those guys had kind of found that if they pushed him, if they made him push hard, Chris had a couple other mechanicals that year in 2011. I think he blew up a motor at one and you know, barely limped it in a couple other races. You know, he went on to win after this race. He went on to win, I believe it was 5 more races in 2011. So he was surely the dominant rider, but Adam grabbed another win. Taylor, I believe, ended up grabbing a win. Bithell didn't get any wins. And then Walker Fowler, this was kind of the emergence you saw of Walker Fowler. He actually got 2 overall wins from the XC2 class later on that year. Yeah. So this is, you know, to back to your point, like this is kind of where the boys started to maybe find a little bit of a chink in Chris's armor, even if it wasn't actually him. You know, it was the machine. And they figured out that if they pushed him hard enough, they could cause him to do damage to his machine.
And I have to think that confidence would come with the support that they had too, because I mean, they had the support of, well, factory Can-Am behind them. And, you know, they were still making machines. They still had a full force effort out at the racetrack. Chris was riding on a machine at this particular point. I think, what was the last year? 2008, I believe that they made the Suzuki LTRs. So at this particular point, he's on a 3-year-old machine, even though it's not that old at that point. They're not making new parts. They're not doing advancements. You know, so that has to, in my opinion, Griff, I would think answering that question would be that I would have to think that, yeah, even though he had a mechanical, that right there would be a boost of confidence too, because you know you've got the team behind you that will help you avoid things like that possibly in the future, would be my mindset on that.
Right.
Yeah, and Rodney, I think you're exactly right. I mean, Warner Can-Am, I mean, we saw they were at their races with a semi. You know, they had so many mechanics, so much going on there. Can-Am was hugely invested, not only in that race program, but, you know, as you mentioned earlier, they were the title sponsor of GNCC at the time. So they wanted nothing more than to be out there winning races, and they were willing to spare no expense to make that happen. So, you know, Adam McGill and Chris Bithell just had, you know, all the resources at that time. I mean, everything was rolling their way, and they were able to get very close to Chris Borich that year in 2011. I think Adam ended up second for the year. Taylor Kaiser, I think, ended up number 3. This was kind of the second, third-ish year for Yamaha and that new bike and that new program. So they were still on the upswing. You know, Chris Borich was, as we mentioned, you know, absolutely just, you know, well-oiled machine, but this was kind of where the chink in his armor, weakness of the program, whatever you might want to call it, this was the first time it was really exposed, was early in this 2011 season. And, you know, he would go on to, you know, win, well, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. He would go on to win 4 more championships after this one. Yeah, I mean, including this one. And, you know, but at that point, this was the first time anybody was able to kind of cause him to have a little hiccup. And it was definitely a historic moment for sure. And for Adam McGill, you know, his first win on the new brand, you know, he's won on a lot of different brands over the years. And, you know, this was the first one for Can-Am. He would end up winning, I think, 1 more race on Can-Am. And then in 2012, I believe he was back on a Honda, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, interesting to look at these results. I look at the overall results from the 2011 season. We see that there were 1, 2, 3, 4 different winners that season. And this is when you mentioned a few moments ago about Walker Fowler and his rise through the ranks. He was the XC2 Pro-Am guy, but he actually got 2 overall wins that year, which would have been 2 more wins for Chris Borich because he got second behind him. He got beat on time adjustments. So to think that, you know, if it hadn't been for Walker Fowler, how many wins could Chris Borich have at this particular point? And would he have ever slowed down? I mean, it's crazy to think that, you know, this race, you know, looking at this season in particular, this is where even though Chris was, I believe, at the peak of his performance, at the height of his career, this was the time that the birth of the challenge was, like you said, the chink in the armor was made. They started finding those weaknesses, and that's when they started chipping away at him. And that's, of course, the dawning of Walker Fowler shortly after that.
Yeah, and I think
foreshadowing.
Yeah, and one other thing to kind of point out with that, Rodney, was, it's not, and I truly believe this. I don't think that in 2010, when Chris was super dominant, I think he won 9, maybe even 10 races that year. And then obviously went on to win 7 in 2011. And even in 2012 and 13 had, many, many, many wins. I don't think it was ever a thing of, like you said, how many more races could Chris have won? Chris has been at the top of his game for a long time. This was just the competitors really stepping up. It wasn't that he had fallen off or not at the top of his game. You're absolutely right. I mean, he was at the pinnacle at this point, but this is just when everybody else was just driving so hard to try and close that gap that the competition was just, in my opinion, in this era was just really just growing by leaps and bounds.
Well, and one thing to point out, a dominator creates his own competition. Somebody, when they're dominant, somebody gets tired of seeing that. Somebody wants to be in that position. So they just keep adding fuel to someone else's fire constantly, and they create the beast that comes to destroy them eventually just by being successful, I think.
So would you say we see some parallels right now between what we just watched on screen versus, if you look at Walker Fowler and how dominant he's been the last several seasons, a guy like Bryson Neal, that's just trying to get there and getting so close, and Cole Richardson and, a lot of guys, they're right there and chomping at the bit, and they want a piece of Walker. They want a piece of those wins. They want a piece of those championships.
Now, and I'm not taking anything away from Walker and his ability and what he's been able to do. We know that some of the stuff that we saw this year, there was some issues and stuff that he came up with, and not taking anything away from Chris Borich and those guys. But I just wonder, do they recognize what kind of competition they breed whenever they become so great?
I think they do. But I think that's part of the, it's a double-edged sword, when you're on top and you're winning so dominantly, as you pointed out, it just kind of puts a little bit of fire in everybody's belly. Like they want that, they want to be up front, they want to be winning. But, and you're enjoying it while you're there. But I think if you're cognizant of your surroundings and understand sports, then that people are gunning for you. And I definitely don't think Walker's resting on his laurels. I think he knows there's guys gunning for him.
That was where I was leading to. Do you think that they get into a comfort zone? And the second part of that question is, while they're enjoying that comfort zone, do these other guys get hungrier? Do they want it? Do they start to want it more? Because they don't have the resources. They are fighting from behind the 8 ball constantly. Are they more driven to make their way to that position than, say, the person that is in that position to hold on to it?
I don't think there's anything that could make Bryson Neal hungrier than he already is. And same for Cole Richardson. I mean, you watch those guys ride, and there's been, and we've talked about this on previous shows going back to last year, we've seen an evolution of the sport, both ATV and motorcycle. But I think the next evolution, in my opinion, is your Bryson Neal, your Cole Richardson. Walker Fowler is incredibly fast and he has great lines, phenomenal technique. But I think everybody recognizes right now that Bryson Neal, Cole Richardson, their aggression level is just, they're up here. Like, so for a guy like Walker, if he wants to continue to win, or a guy like Jared McClure, a guy like Chris Borich, a guy like Adam McGill, if they want to win, they're going to have to take everything they've learned throughout their long, storied careers, but then they're also going to have to throw in this mix of, when it gets nasty and it's time to just pin it and kind of put yourself out there and go for it. Bryson Neal, Cole Richardson, they're a little bit younger, and that's their attack style. They're wild, man. They'll go for it, and if you want to win, you're going to have to be willing to match their intensity.
No doubt. And Jared and Griff, I know watching it from a spectator standpoint, it's got to be pretty interesting for you guys to be bearing witness to the hunger that you're seeing. I mean, you, Jared, out on the trail, You're seeing it firsthand when these guys come through the woods. You can hear them coming down the trail. You can probably tell by the riding style and the aggressiveness who that might be coming up the trail. And Griff, you from a director standpoint on the Racer TV side of things, just getting a glimpse of someone coming through in a camera shot, you can tell, I think, the difference in the aggressiveness as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's times the first lap, the first sweep lap of the afternoon race, I always go, my God, I just want to make it to the finish before those guys catch me. That's just, I want to burn this lap before those guys catch me, because I don't want to be in the mix. I don't want to be in the way when those guys come around. And I'd probably say 75% of the time I'm able to make it. A lot of times everybody in the afternoon is an established rider. They're pretty good. They don't need too much help. And I'm able to just go burn a lap off the start and get out of everybody's way and let them go race and not have to worry about ending up in the way at some point. But the times that it happens, riding through the woods, and you can just, a lot of times you can just tell that, man, they're right there. It's time to get out of the way. Because a lot of times at that point, it's still just a whole herd of guys. Or I've learned that if you only hear one person at the past 2 years, that one person is probably Walker Fowler all by himself at that point.
Yeah, no doubt. And Griffin, you recognize a lot of things too, from a visual aspect on the TV cameras, and you hear it sometimes, in the directing, you're like, especially when there's a change, you'll see, oh, is that so-and-so now in the lead? I mean, you just hear little clips like that, and it's funny how you key in on things like that.
Yeah, Rodney, I have so much going through my head right now. I feel like we could make this show 3 hours if we wanted to. And I don't want to do that, but I do want to bring some stuff up. Maybe, we had a couple clips this year. I believe it was at Matthews Farms, I think, when Bryson Neal cut a line far to the inside of a turn and met Walker Fowler on the trail, and actually fell back down the hill and, conceding the lead to Walker. And then the very next lap, he was able to make the same pass and make it stick. And I love seeing that. As a director, one of the worst things, and I love Walker, but one of the worst things for me to see is Walker Fowler get the whole shot and then he's gone. And I might as well take a nap, because that's the way, that's Walker Fowler's game, is to get out and go, and it makes for some boring racing. Now this year, what Johnny said, the aggression from Richardson and Neal was something that got me really, really excited. Just from a TV aspect, from a fan standpoint, I want to see good racing, and that's something they brought to the table. Johnny, I was going to ask you, but then I kind of in my mind answered the question. Do we know whether Walker's aggressive or not? Because he's never had to really ride from the back, ride from second or third place. But then I thought the last time he lost a championship is because Borich passed him in the last corner and was much more aggressive than Walker was. So that tells me maybe – go ahead, Johnny. Looks like you have something to say.
No, I just want to clarify. When I said about Richardson and Neal being their aggression and them being aggressive, I want to be very clear. I'm not referring to them like physical aggression on other riders. Like, yes, that is part of it. But I guess I should clarify, like, they're aggressive, their intensity. They're attacking the track, whereas Walker flows the track. Walker pushes where he can and gives what the track will take him, and the race will or takes what the track will give him, what the race will give him. Bryson Neal and Cole Richardson attack every part of the track as if it owes them money. They ride like they're mad at the dirt, like they want to hurt the dirt. And Walker to this point has been able to still be the dominant rider far and away and win these championships by just being smooth and doing his thing. So I think, to answer your question, I think Walker has proven, he and Chris had a few scrapes up over the years. And, I think he's kind of proven that he's not going to be pushed around. Not that I think we've seen a whole lot of that, but and vice versa. I think all the guys up front, man, if they get into each other, they're going to pay each other back within reason. Everybody's respectful, but, you're not going to let somebody push you around. But I think, Rodney, as you like to kind of allude to, I think we might be at kind of one of these crescendos of Walker on top, winning these championships, and we have Bryson Cole like right there. Either one of those guys could be the guy to step into his shoes. But I think we're at one of those points where we saw that, we were talking about that in 2011 with Chris Borich, and he went on to win 11, 12, 13, 14 for 4 more years.
Right.
So the question is, in 2021, to get people hyped up, how's Walker Fowler going to respond? Is he going to come back out business as usual? And unfortunately for you, Griff, give us some boring racing? Or are we going to see these scraps all the way down to the finish line? Or could it be, Cole? Could it be Bryson? Could it be Chris Borich with a renaissance season? That to me is the exciting thing about preseason is right now, on paper, I'm tied for a championship.
Oh yeah,
and so is everybody else. And until we get to round 1, we don't know. We can speculate, and that's what the hype and all that is about. And it's awesome because we've got a lot of great riders right now, a lot of riders that are pushing, that are up in the front. And it's going to be exciting, man. So I'm pumped for it. We're like less than 30 days away and I can't go. I can't wait to go.
Hey, no doubt. I agree with you. I'm pretty psyched up about it and pretty pumped up about it myself. One other thing that I do want to pass along before we start giving our parting shots and so forth is one thing that I've said to Walker, I've said it to Joel Hetrick, I've said it to Chad Weenan. On the days that they lose or the days that they're challenged the most right down to the wire, I said, I realize that's a tough loss, but that was really good for the sport. And I don't mean it in a bad way. And I don't mean because they got beat. I mean it in the way that the heart that was shown in the battles that they waged to get that second or to get that win or whatever the case may be. So, I like to see those good tight battles right down. That's what brings the fans back. But Walker likes to win them by miles, just like anybody else would like to win. And of course, with that, let's do our round table here. Griff, I know you've got a couple points or something you want to make too.
And I'll wrap up with this. A question for the group: is our next champion on the line right now? Is he in the field? Or because back in 2011, he wasn't. He was in XC2. So I guess leading up as the excitement builds for 2021, not to take anything away from our 2011 race that we just saw, but is our next champion on the front line? I don't know.
I'll weigh in on that one, and I'll make it real quick. I won't give an answer, but I'll say that there are a lot of people that think, not a lot, but I've heard a few people. When I say not a lot, I don't mean in a bad way. There's a few people that think that the current crop of XC1 riders and even XC2 may not be the ones who will defeat Walker Fowler. They think that he might be able to hold out against the current crop until somebody like maybe a Lane McCormick or somebody like that who's currently still in the youth ranks. Not youth, but I think this will be his first year on a 450 once he turns 16. I don't know that I want to weigh in with my opinion on that one. But I will say that I think it's going to be a very exciting 2021. I think, all the guys we've talked about, Bryson Neal, Cole Richardson, I think Austin Abney has shown some serious promise coming out of last year's XC2 champion. And I think Brandon Owens, another rider that will be in XC2 this year, has some serious potential. And then going back further, Lane McCormick and a whole bunch of guys who I didn't mention. Not that I don't think they're capable of a championship, but we know they are. Adam McGill, Chris Borich, Jared McClure, like these are guys that all have proven they can win races and in the right situation, sure, they could be a championship threat. So it's exciting, man.
I can't wait.
Jared?
Man, I'll tell you right there, Johnny 100% took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I agree word for word with exactly what Johnny just said. There's some serious talent coming up through the ranks. It's really, that's a hard question to answer because there's guys that have the potential to do it, but will Walker be able to give them that little extra edge? Is he going to lose that little extra edge? Man, I just don't know. There's a ton of talent, and I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody, but man, when it comes down to the long, full stretch the entire season, it's incredibly hard to beat Walker.
Yeah, and that's my sentiments exact. Go ahead, Johnny.
I just want to say one more thing, in regards to up and coming champions. I have no problem admitting, and Walker lives close to me, and people will say this was biased, but I called Walker for a championship back when he was riding in A class. I felt he would be the one to knock Chris Borich off. I really did. I didn't, not taking anything away from anyone else at the time, but I didn't feel anybody else had the gusto to do it. And that's why I say I don't really want to answer that question right now. I'm not saying I don't see that Lane McCormick, Bryce Neal, any of those guys could win a championship, but to me, it's not as clear cut as it was then. I think in my mind, Walker was going to beat Chris Borich someday, whether it be because Chris Borich retired or because, I saw Walker as the next championship champion going all the way back to 2009. He didn't win that championship till 2015. Right now, I don't know. And that's what makes it more exciting. It could be so many people, and it could be this year, or it could be another 5 or 6 years. We have no idea.
Well, I have to tend to agree that Walker's going to be tough to beat. He may give a few races here and so forth, but the consistency of the championship season, I think, is where it's going to be tough to beat Walker Fowler. You're going to get him on some races. You're going to have his back against the walls, maybe a few things. But I think the consistency is probably going to be what it's going to be tough to beat as far as Walker. I was going to say, I was like, I don't know that we'll ever see anybody as dominant as what we've seen in our last 3 GNCC or 4 GNCC champions, Barry Hawk, Bill Balance, Chris Borich, and now Walker Fowler. And, I was thinking along the lines, I think what we're maybe about to see is an opportunity where we're going to see this thing kind of switch up, where it'll be a year or two here, this guy, year or two there, that guy. But, I think, Johnny, you bring a very valid point when you mention the name of Lane McCormick. He is one of those guys that you look at right now and you think, wow, if he continues on this path, he's going to be tough to beat. But you also got to look at the class of riders he's riding with. He's riding with guys that he has created monsters out of from the youth ranks, guys like Damian Hawkins in particular, another kid that I think that we should probably keep an eye on. And that's just one. And those are just 2. I mean, these kids, I think you're right. I mean, Lane could be that guy, and Lane might be the next guy that wins the championship, kind of like what you're saying. And I don't know, will anybody be as dominant as what we've seen champions be in the past? That's a question that I think is going to be even tougher to answer, maybe, than who the next guy is. Will the next guy be the next guy, so to speak, the one that can't be beat for championships for nearly a decade?
Yeah, and I think just to throw one more name in there that hasn't been mentioned, Hunter Hart, incredibly dominant as a youth rider, and not to take anything away from Hunter, but he just hasn't had that pop in his first 2 seasons in XT1, and I think that really does kind of say just how tough that XT1 class is and how tough it is to crack even the top 5 overall consistently, let alone be on the podium. We haven't seen anybody leave the sport in a few years. I mean, the top guys are still the top guys, and they're not making it easy for anybody to come up and do that. And, Hunter's another one. I mean, he's still young. He easily could find that stride and start winning races. But yeah, it's guys like Walker, Bryson, Cole, Chris, Jared, Adam, those are your top 6, 7 guys every year, year in and year out. And it's tough to beat them.
It most certainly is. And with that, any parting shots? Anybody got anything else they want to add before we go today, guys?
Yeah, I just want to say, when you're watching the show, look at Barry Hawk in there running the helmet cam, man. That was still something really cool. And I always say, man, I wish I could do that, but nobody really wants to watch me get passed by everybody and follow them for about 2 turns, and then they're gone. Because that's what everybody else, every other normal guy like me, that's what you see every weekend. So nobody wants to watch that.
we got the drone now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Quad God on a bike following however many time champion Chris Borich. I thought that's quad royalty right there. And really fun show today, guys. Thanks for having me on. Just talking about this, I got butterflies in my stomach thinking about round 1 coming up in 3 weeks. And like I said, I don't want to take away from what we just watched it from 2011, but this we need to do like a hype show or like just a get online and bench race for a while, just talking about, the storylines leading into 2021, and it gets me super excited. So thank you, everybody. Johnny, it's been a pleasure. Bolton, Ronnie as well.
All right. Thanks, Griff. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Johnny Gallagher. On behalf of all of us here at Racer TV, this has been another great and exciting episode of Behind the Bars.
Good job, guys.